Welcome everybody. This is Jason, and the name of this week's workshop is Promises Kept Part 3. This one is all about glass TXMTs. So, let's jump right in. What makes glass TXMTs special? Glass TXMTs have several unique features: transparency, reflectivity, and specularity. That's the shininess. They can support textures, and they can support alpha blending. That means it can be semi-transparent. What parts or properties of the TXMT resource do we need to focus on? First, there's the environment cube. That's how much the glass material actually reflects. The alpha blending, that is how it handles the TXTR, how it blends the TXTR into the material. And the diffuse and emissive coefficients. We can think of these as the outer and inner glows of the glass. Untextured glass. The first property group in untextured glass is going to be the environment cube. This controls how shiny the glass is. There are 5 components of the environment cube, and all of them need to be present for the glass to reflect properly. These properties are standard material environment cube blur factor. This is how much the game blurs the actual glass. If you imagine the environment cube, it's an invisible cube built around your glass, but each of those sides has a texture pre-assigned by Maxis. The blur factor, that is how clear or blurry that environment cube texture is going to be. The coefficient. This is a bit tougher to explain. It's an RGB value, so red, green, and blue. But normally they're fairly neutral, like 50, 50, 50, or 150, 150, 150. Basically, this is the level of shininess. This is where you get that really polished reflections, or really like semi-gloss reflections, or just anything in between. Lock to camera, I don't really focus on it that much, and it's hard to explain. I linked Pixelhate's. He did this wonderful series called Exploring the TXMT, and I just linked that whole series in the workshop post. But basically, lock to camera, the way that you're perceiving the environment cube around the glass is, does it move with the camera or does it stay in one position? The environment cube mode, I think there are a couple of them, but in order to get the reflection the way that we would normally perceive the reflection, that mode would need to be set to reflection. And then standard matte environment cube texture name. This one, most folks don't really see this one a lot, but basically what it does, there are all of these pre-configured Maxis environment cubes. There are high gloss, which is most of the windows. There are the outdoor daytime, which is the environment cube that you see on the car windows, the car windshields. It reflects like trees and stuff back at you. And then there's, I believe, outdoor nighttime, and 3 different golds. One of them is for the gold wedding ring, and there are a couple of others, and then there's silver, and then there's copper. There are a lot of pre-configured environment cubes that a lot of people don't take advantage of, and they're interesting to play with. The next property group is default textures. The 3 that really matter here, there's the standard material diffuse coefficient, the emissive coefficient, and the specularity coefficient. So diffuse and emissive, these are like the inner and outer colors of the glass, I guess is the best way to describe this. And again, these are RGB values. We're going to play with that a little bit later in the workshop. And then specularity is just overall how shiny it is. It's a little different from the environment cube because this one is just RGB. It's not dependent on a preset environment cube. Moving on to textured glass. So if you have this untextured glass material that you really like, then to make it a textured material, like say, oh, this one is really cool. I just like the way the environment cube, and I like how shiny it is, and I like everything about it, but I want to make it textured. So we add a semi-transparent glass TXTR as we would like adding any other subset. And then we add texture properties and values to the untextured glass TXMT, and then we rebuild the scene graph. That's a fixed integrity operation. Like the environment cube, the texture has 5 properties. You would need to add all of these properties in order for the texture to be enabled. In addition to adding the texture properties, we would need to focus on standard material alpha blend mode. Make sure that that's set to blend, and then standard material alpha test enabled, that's set to 0. This will ensure that the texture is translucent. Finally, make sure that both the this is after you rebuild the scene graph. Make sure that both the texture name for the TXTR and the environment cube that you're using are present in the file list tab of the TXMT.
So I had a question. When you said
Yes.
that there was like an environment cube pre-configurations, is there a list of those somewhere in SimPE or like like a resource with those, or like how do you know what all the pre-configs even are? Is it just like
So
loading up different items and looking at it, or?
so if you go to the resource post and
Oh,
you look at that link for Pix's understanding the
oh.
TXMT, I believe part 3 of that is a complete list. Let's go to glass cube untextured first. And let's have a quick preview in the GMDC to see what we're dealing with. So we got just a fairly kind of smoky medium gray glass. And now let's mess with it. Let's see what happens. So if you're following along, you see the sculpture is the one with the 20 faces here. I believe that's the glass. Yep, the one that says sculpture is your glass. So go to TXMT and the resource tree here, and we look for the one that says sculpture. So then go to categorize properties. Now here we've got a blur factor of 0.6. So, and just go crazy, have fun with it. I'm going to crank mine up to 1.1. So I'm going to go 155. No, that's too much. Probably about 95. But again, if you're following along, just do whatever makes you happy. We don't mess with lock to camera. We don't mess with this. But I want to do a different thing with the environment cube. So mostly we just use the kitchen high gloss for glass. But just for grins, I'm going to choose... I'm going to do the medium gold here. So we just replace that texture name. And then this doesn't really matter because we don't have an alpha texture. Okay, so now the fun part. So these are the, I guess you would call them the outer and inner glows. And here you can really go crazy. You can just kind of experiment. So I'm going to do like kind of an aquarium looking glass. Just something like kind of a pale... I want that, but darker. No. It's not giving me the RGB value. Try a dark cyan. And then this one, maybe I'll go with a sea green and see what happens there. And then your specularity, I think that's fairly good for glass, but you can make it shinier or less shiny. Okay, and then as a final step, that environment cube that I copied, I want to replace that in the file list. Okay, we commit, and let's save our changes right quick. And let's preview that and see what it did. That's awesome! Yeah, that's really cool. I'm going to leave mine just like that and see how it looks in the game, but if you're following along, just knock yourself out. I'm going to open the textured one. And as you can see, I've already got my pre-configured texture. But if you want to swap out the texture, one thing you can do, go to the TXTR in the resource tree, click that one in the resource list, then you build the XT. I'm going to go with this one. But I already uploaded a couple of other textures that you can play with. So I'm just going to go none, 512 by 512, build it as DXT3. And you can see this is a semi-transparent PNG. So what makes that work, we have a look at texture blending here. Oh, no. So the best way to think of this is, do you want it to be just a simple on-off, or do you want it to be semi-transparent? So if you want the simple on-off, the alpha test enable, this will become 1. But if it's semi-transparent, it's very important to turn this off because this overrides the other one. So then in blend mode, we make sure that that's blend. So 0 and blend. Then, in order to add resources, for example, you want to enable the texture. This is just a regular untextured. The way that we would do this, we click add, and then on this new texture, or on this new property, we got the property name, and then we enter the value name, like that. And then we would need to enter the V, just like that, and then the value name. And then we would enter this standard material base texture, replicate, and that remains as 0. Add that one, and standard material base texture enabled. That needs to be true. Then we add one more, and this will be standard material base texture name. And then we add that here. So you would need to add those 5 things, and then add the TXTR, point the standard material based texture name to the TXTR that you loaded, and it's very important that it have the $!C05000000 exclamation point, because that's telling it, okay, the resource that you're looking for is in this local package. Don't look for it in the game files. But we don't need those 5 things that I just added, so we're just going to get rid of those because I already added those. Now this is a kind of a green bottle glass. So I'm going to crank up the shininess a little. Not a whole lot, just a little bit glossier than it was before. And then I'm going to swap out the environment cube. I want this one to be... Oh, that's not my thing. For this one, I'm going to go the medium silver just to see what happens. And then I'm going to crank up the material, or sorry, the diffuse coefficient and the emissive coefficient. See, this is a green, so I want to see what happens when you do like a red. So instead of doing that, I'm just going to go... I want it a little darker. It's kind of a dark red. And then an actual orange here, maybe. Okay, so I made my changes here. Oh, and also we need to in the environment cube, we need to make sure that we paste over the new environment cube name that we're using. We commit that there. And let's see what happened. It didn't really affect the glass that much. It's maybe a little bit shinier, but maybe it's because it can only show the texture. But let's commit that. Before I get this a test in the game, let's have a look at the scene grapher. Okay, so that's an issue. What if I just go silver? Let's get rid of that unlit. Just go with the silver. There it is. So I think Pix has it down as onlit, but it might just be unlit. When you see this black node in the scene graph, that means that it's referring to a Maxis game file. So let's have a look at that in the scene graph as well. Yeah, see, I think the name of it is wrong. Oh, see, I followed Pix's instructions to the letter, but it might be a typo here. He said it's on lit. Well, I'm suspecting it's unlit. So let me see what happens. Reflection, gold, unlit. Yeah, it's just not seeing it. Okay, not a problem. We'll just change it to reflection gold. And let's double check the scene graph. Yeah, there we go. See, now it's a black node. That means that it's somewhere in the game files. Oh, I think there's a OMSP there. That's why it shifts over. Okay, so my results are a little weird, but TXMTs are not an exact science. Sometimes you have to kind of experiment with them. Yeah, see, so that is the. Remember, the glass texture is kind of green, but yeah, for some reason it's really desaturated and it's got kind of the reddish orange thing going on. And then this one, I went way too high on the diffuse coefficient, I think. But it's, I mean, they're fun to play with. And that's it for this one.
So I did change the RGB to purple, and we do have purple, but I put the glass texture on the frame accidentally because I came back and I just panicked and I don't think I
Oh,
did the right texture because this was the glass texture that I picked up, but now it's the frame, so it looks like tiger print on the frame instead of like the ripple glass. But the color is fine, like because the color was
yeah.
supposed to be purple.
The color is interesting.